Hello and welcome back. And let's be honest, if you're thinking of getting out of the clouds and onto local, chances are you've been hearing about this brand UGREEN, who've been making a lot of noise in the world of NAS, launching their products about almost a year and a half ago now. They launched the DXP series on Kickstarter in spring 2024 and now in autumn 2025. They've got a bigger range. It's available at traditional retail, and they've now got a value series in the DH series. And I think a lot of you are wondering, what should I spend my money on if I am going to buy one of these? What exactly does the cheaper box deny me instead of going for the more expensive one? With more than $200 between these two systems, a little bit more than that in some retailers, we have to wonder, for you, which one of these best deserves your money and your data. But before we go any further, it's worth highlighting the sponsor of today's video, UGREEN. UGREEN are currently running a promotion on both of these devices on the 7th and 8th of October 2025 with 20% off each of them, with the DXP series arriving at $559 after the 20% discount and the DH4300 arriving at $339 after the 20% discount there. So it's going to be on offer during those times. But I will also add as well that UGREEN asked for this video to be made and asked to sponsor it. Well, joke's on you, UGREEN. I would have made this video anyway. I would have done this for free. The website's called NAS Compared, for God's sake. But let's roll up our sleeves and crack on. Regardless of which one of these two you might choose to buy, it's worth highlighting that they both arrive with the turnkey NAS software UGOS. That operating system that these arrive with, both on a separate drive inside, so you're not using out any of the internal storage in order to access it. That arrives with support of an in-browser file manager. There's also mobile clients, desktop clients that you can use to access the system securely and remotely using their own relay services and using things like Tailscale if you choose to use those. On top of that, there's two-factor authentication. There's an AI photo recognition application, a video application, a music application there. You've also got support of iSCSI on both of them there for kind of raw storage if you choose it. They've both got 2.5 gigabit networking there, or 2.5 gig Ethernet. Again, a little bit more on that side of the table, more on that later on. You've also got lots of snapshot tools there. You've got RAID support there. You've got a multi-tiered backup tool for synchronization with cloud services, as well as NAS to NAS backups. Both of them are going to give you a great on the ground, on-prem, or on-premises, let's call it what it is, NAS server experience. But now let's talk about what one perhaps gives you a little bit more than the other. Storage. Let's face it, one of the main reasons you're buying one of these is to get away from expensive cloud services and particularly egress costs of when you want to pull large amounts of data back and the cost that can incur. Both of these devices are 4-bay NAS systems. They both arrive with support up to 4 hard drives. They both, by the way, support up to 30 TB hard drives, such as the Seagate Ironwolf. We've tested it on both of these. However, it's worth highlighting that there are distinct differences. Firstly, in terms of aesthetic and design, this system, the DXP4800 Plus, this arrives with removable trays. They both arrive with support of 2.5-inch and 2.5-inch SSD and 3.5-inch hard drives, I should say there. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather. But this system has traditional trays on the outside. It also has locks for stopping them being removed accidentally. And also this supports hot swapping. Now this, on the other hand, has a much more vertical design. It's actually a smaller size overall. And this uses slightly more plasticky trays there for putting in your 2.5 or 3.5-inch media. And when you put them inside, they slot in top down there from the top to the bottom, inside via SATA. And again, you can screw in 2.5-inch media, but still hot swapping on this isn't quite as nice. I think you still can, but it's not really designed in the same kind of more industrial methodology that this is. But it's also worth highlighting, also in terms of storage, the story doesn't stop there. On this, we've not only have we got an SD card slot there, SD3, to inject media directly, and both of them have got USB ports, more on that later on, but this also arrives at the base with two 2280 M.2 NVMe slots there on the base. That allows you to add further fast action storage for caching to improve your upload to data speed, and also regularly accessed data will be copied over to those drives. That's what caching is. To access it, normally I/O or small data, but you can also use those for storage pools to create a much smaller, faster area of storage alongside the archival, larger capacity but slower hard drives. This doesn't have that. It only has the 4 drives inside. So just keep that in mind. And finally, it's worth highlighting that remember I said that both of these arrive with a drive inside that the operating system's on board? This arrives with a separate 128 gig M.2 NVMe inside for the operating system, a much faster drive for the operating system to read from, whereas this uses a smaller kind of flash storage memory known as eMMC. Although they're both flash storage memory, that is much slower overall. It's also smaller at 32 gig eMMC, and that results in this software being more reactive, faster and responsive. But also, if you want to install another operating system, such as True NAS, such as Unraid, such as Zimmer, such as anything, this allows you to do it and install it on that additional drive inside, or use one of the other M.2s inside to create a secondary operating system to flick between if you choose to. Again, UGREEN allow you to do that. It's supported and it won't affect your hardware warranty, but you can't really do that on this, because although it does have an HDMI out and theoretically a KVM, installing a third-party operating system on this architecture would be a lot messier. It's not impossible. There's certain ones like Open Media Vault that you could run on this. But really, as this is an ARM and ARM, or on that later on architecture, using a third-party operating system on this is not advised. And I think it would invalidate at least some of that hardware warranty. But again, not too sure. Bottom line, if you're looking at true storage potential and scalability, this wins in spades. And lastly, when I went over to Shenzhen to see UGREEN's headquarters back in March, it's worth highlighting that they were talking about their expansions they're hopefully going to be integrating, which are their direct attached storage systems connected via USB. I'm pretty certain when that comes, you'll get a better experience with expandability on this side of the table because of that architecture. I'm not saying this won't support expansions over USB, but given that there is faster USB and a better CPU-based power, when expansions arrive, don't be surprised in terms of long-term scalability that as your data grows, you may have a better experience with this. Remember I talked about the software earlier on? Again, both of them run UGOS, and we've done full deep dives into that software as it has developed over the last year and a half, and lots of features and bells and whistles have been added, and although it's still not perfect yet, it is gaining ground quite rapidly. It's a BTRFS based file system if you choose to. There's also ext4 if you like. On top of that, you've got the support of all the apps and services I've mentioned, but it's worth remembering that this system here, the 4800 Plus, actually has more hardware capability underneath, and therefore certain apps and services are just not available on this. And in some cases, the same application has extra bells and whistles. For example, AI photo recognition. Both of them run AI photo recognition, which means you can store your photos on it, but you can also have photos presented to you using facial recognition, object recognition. But although you can go into the back end and play with some of the settings, it's worth remembering that there are more AI modules you can integrate, and therefore better recognition on this than you can on this, with very specific searches tailored to your needs available and possible on this that are just not available on this. And if you are going to be dealing with a lot of photo and a little bit of video, but predominantly photo in the case of this, you're going to have a much better retrieval of that data based on your own needs on this, as well as the recognition of the system because of a better base hardware, and therefore then putting a much more stretched out and more muscular version of that of the apps and services on this. But that extends beyond just photos. When it comes to video media, bear in mind that this has integrated graphics for that CPU. This also has an element of Mali GPU integrated graphics, but they are just better on this, and therefore hardware transcoding in things like Plex, Jellyfin and MB, as well as using the native theater app, are available to you there in a way that they're not really on this. Again, there is integrated graphics to a point, the ARM CPU equivalent, but still nonetheless, you are just going to have a better media experience on this. Lastly, outside of media, when it comes to business processes for things like Docker, for things like virtual machine, although both of them support Docker, again, you will be able to run more containerized applications, you'll be able to have more resources at your disposal and they'll run faster, but also you can deploy a virtual machine using the virtual machine software on this, again, which means whether you want to run Ubuntu or Windows VM, Android Cranium, that sort of thing, you can do that on this, but you can't on this. That might be well outside the swell of what you want these systems to do, but if you are interested in home labbing in a much more proactive way, you're going to have more to play with on this in terms of the software that is offered with it and the software capabilities, because a lot of those apps aren't even available on this because of that architecture. But we can't harp on about hardware architecture without really getting into the weeds. Now, the DH4300 arrived later, and this system arrived with an 8-core ARM processor. It's actually technically 2 4-core processors there. It's a Rockchip ARM CPU, and that CPU also arrives with 8 gig of LPDDR4 memory on board there. It arrives with a 2.5 gig network port there on the rear and 5 gig USB connectivity. There's also an HDMI 2.1 there, which is actually surprisingly rare for an ARM CPU system. At least in the last year or so, though, we are starting to see a lot more ARM systems with HDMI out. Now, that does the job. It means lower power consumption. It means generally the system having a much smaller impact in the operational environment if you are concerned about how much your lecky bill is going to be. Keep in mind that this thing can go down almost to single digits of watt consumption without the drives, if the drives are completely in hibernation. When it spins up, it's going to go a little higher into the teens, early 20s. And during full operation, yes, hard drives are going to draw somewhere between 2.5 watt when they're in complete and utter idle, if you go to the larger capacities, and closer to the 10 watt per drive. But ultimately, power consumption on this, like for like, isn't just lower. We are saying 20-25% the size of this in terms of its power consumption. However, you just can't argue with the hardware profile for that $200 to maybe $250 price difference, depending on where you shop. The CPU is an Intel Pentium 5-core 6-thread 12th Gen Alder Lake processor. It also arrives with a base 8 gig of memory, but it's DDR5 memory, which supplies with on-die ECC. Not like traditional ECC, it's more like an internal checksum to make sure data writes passing through are accurate and healed when needed. But it can also be scaled up across 2 memory slots up to 64 gigabytes. Again, 8 is all you're getting. You can't upgrade it on this. This scales up to 64. In terms of network connectivity, not only has it got a 2.5 gig port, but it's also got a 10 gig port there, which is pretty darn good. Alongside that, with multiple 10 gig USB connections around it. So there is a greater internal power, but more importantly, a better means externally to take advantage of it. Now, it gets hotter, whereas this is a plastic chassis, this is a metal chassis for heat dissipation. That gives you some idea between these two just how much is going on inside. And needless to say, it does translate to a higher power consumption both in idle and active use, but depending on your use case scenarios, chances are that might well work out for you. Now, throughout the course of this video, there's going to be some of you that may already have taken to the comments and said, do you know there's a third 4-bay? And you're right. Between these two devices, there's actually right there in the middle a DXP4800 non-Plus system. Now, the only reason I've not mentioned it in this video is I feel like you're missing out on the advantage of both of these two systems with that middle one. I could have made this video to be about all three, but realistically, the middle device there, which arrives with a 4-core Intel N series processor there, it still has 8 gig of memory, has some of the features of this, but crucially not all. It has an extra 2.5 gig port there. It has M.2. It doesn't have the horsepower of this, and the price difference between the standard class and the Plus series is so small that if you are considering this one in the middle, I would just immediately recommend going towards the Plus series model anyway, because what you miss out on in almost every regard is worth more than the price difference between them. And if this one in the middle seems, oh, it'll do the job, then I would still recommend to you to go for this one, because this one at the very least keeps it efficient, keeps it affordable, and the price drop, with or without that 20% discount that I mentioned in the intro, is still pretty darn good. So for efficiency's sake, or for power user's sake, it means that the non-Plus series in the middle doesn't really be one thing or the other, and that's why we've not covered it in today's video. Bottom line, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record right now, if you want power, if you want scalability, if you want upgradability, if you want more software features, if you want the ability to use third-party operating systems with, choose the one you like. If you want to be able to take advantage of fast internal and external processes there. If you want serious storage and storage tiering, manual of course at the moment, arguably this is the better option across every regard. But that doesn't make it better for everyone. This, with its lower price point, lower power consumption, lower impact, is still a phenomenal option. I can understand, much like larger players in the NAS industry that have diversified their portfolio over the last 10 to 20 to 25 years to have value entries, mid-tier entries and powerhouse entries. UGREEN, after a year and a half, are doing the same thing. And there is an audience for this, there is an audience for this. But which one are you? Power user, or I just want an alternative to Dropbox? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Again, there'll be links in the description to get hold of these devices, both from UGREEN's own site and from Amazon. And don't forget about that discount between the 7th and 8th of October of 20% on these, and I believe a few other UGREEN devices. Stay tuned for other discussions of another upcoming UGREEN NAS device coming soon, the 2-bay version of this. But apart from that, if you want to support what we do here at the channel, it'll be great if you've enjoyed the video, if you go ahead to use those links in the description to get hold of your UGREEN NAS. We get a small commission here at NAS Compared and allows us to keep doing what we do. Thanks again to UGREEN for sponsoring this video. Again, would have done it for free. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.